to honor the anniversary of the passing of Edgar Allan Poe on October 7th, 1849 at the young age of 40, very young. We'll be foregoing our normal cold open in lieu of a toast to one of America's great writers. This one is to you, Mr. Poe. Cheers.
Cheers.
Ooh, this is the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. Ooh. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me today, Spencer, the Transylvania Terror Church.
I was wondering
It's themed.
if themed or just badly punded.
Badly punded. Today is our first bookcast on Dracula. Like I said, for you folks listening, I think I said this last episode maybe. I'm not doing a guide on this. We're just going to read like every 5 chapters or so and talk about them. It's not a very long book. Well, it's 300-400 pages. I don't know. But it reads quick.
Especially whenever, like I know we'll get into it when we talk about how the format of it can kind of make it seem, can kind of quicken up the pace of reading it too.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we started the episode, did you notice any weird, well, I guess you could call them quotes because they're quotes from the book, but any weird dialogue in there? Because the Transylvania speak and a lot of the accents kind of threw me. I don't know if you got to some of the weird British dudes' accents and stuff, but at the very beginning, he, what was his name? Jonathan.
Sometimes an H.
Yeah, that's pretty, I don't have the book in front of me. That's how we forget the fucking main character's name already.
Well, in our favor, like, he is the main character, but we haven't read a chapter with Tim Holly in it for like 5 chapters.
Yeah, and those chapters did seem a little long. Hold on, I'm finding it. We can't have a bookcast and not know the main character's name immediately. Jonathan Harker. It was like a very generic last name. But anyway, Jonathan Harker is going to old Transylvania to meet Count Dracula for business dealings, and he gets a very creepy carriage driver, and they're going through the mountains and stuff. And I just found this one quote really stuck out to me. I don't know why. It was like, it didn't seem like it fit the story really. Again, I don't know if it was just the way because like, spoiler alert, the carriage driver is like Dracula.
Yeah.
But the way he was speaking was just, I don't know, backwards talk. Anyway, here it is.
Wasn't he supposed to be like a gypsy kind of? Wasn't the cab driver supposed to be like a gypsy kind of character? So yeah,
so I don't know if Dracula's put on an accent or what, but it was very strange. So anyway,
Dracula had a character he was working on.
I should have wrote this down if this is when he first met the carriage driver or whatnot. But when he's going on the ride here, it's a night too. I think, of course, it is. Dracula can't go on night. The night is chill, mine her, and my master, the count, bade me take all care of you. There is a flask of Slivovitz underneath the seat, if you should require it. And on this eve, I must ask you, dear sir, do you want to go to Transylvania and stab Dracula in the ass with a garlic dildo? Surge! Suck the blood!
I was wondering if they were gonna make an appearance during this series or not.
But you agree, that was a really weird thing to throw in Dracula, right? Right at the beginning. That was like in the first 5 chapters, the surge.
Get it out of the way.
When I read that, I was ecstatic. I was like, damn.
Well, that is the only way you could get things done back then. I mean, do you ever notice that when you're reading these, like, the older books, and especially when they're, like, set down, or books set in that time period of, like, oh, where's the nearest wiring office?
Yeah.
Can set off, and hopefully this guy gets it to the person, and all the letters and just like, it would be terrible. I don't know how anybody got anything done back then.
Well, for one, smaller communities.
Yeah.
You're mainly in your village. You're not like, if you're like Jonathan Harker who's going to Transylvania and doing business dealings, very difficult. You get sending letters back and forth.
And this might be...
Who's the mail guy that had to go to Dracula's castle all the time?
I was going to say, how did Dracula find the
guy in England? He's never been there.
Yeah, like how do you find that out? You don't have what's the website that the what the dude from Jurassic Park does. The hotel.
Expedia or Stamps.com or Apartments.com?
The
Jeff
apartment.
Goldblum?
Yeah, the Apartments.com. If you don't have Apartments.com, how's he gonna...
You fucked up every bit of that reference.
Yeah.
The guy from Jurassic Park with the site about the thing with the places that you stay that are like apartments.
Yeah. Couldn't remember any of it.
Sorry, we got an oddball tangent. But yeah, I thought that, why drink blood when you got surge?
Because you can't handle the surge.
Dracula's just roiding out on the surge. Anyway, more serious talk. I guess we'll start at the beginning. The first 5 chapters of Dracula deal with Jonathan Harker. Not to bore you folks, but he goes to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula because of some business dealings. Dracula wants to buy a estate in London, I believe.
For business.
Of course, he wants the most dreary castle in London and with, lots of creepy places to hide out.
And they don't ever get into what the actual business is, right?
I thought it was Dracula buying property.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, he wants to buy property, and Jonathan Harker, again, that stuff was kind of boring. But on the way to meet Dracula, Jonathan Harker staying with some random Romanians or whatever, and there's a lot of the finger crossing, making the finger crosses whenever Dracula's brought up, and pretty much everyone knows he's a bad man, except for Jonathan Harker. And then he gets all these warnings and dire warnings, and he meets the carriage driver who takes him, as we saw in the beginning, the surge-addicted carriage driver.
Before he leaves the village, one of the older ladies there actually gives him a cross.
Which is very useful, it turns out. But the carriage driver is very creepy and very strong, as the handshake shows. As they're going through, there's like a scene with wolves, and the carriage driver gets out, and the wolves are going to eat them. There's a shitload of them, and then all of a sudden they just stop. I'm like, oh, okay, we'll behave. So essentially, I kind of guessed it fairly quickly. That I was like, oh, that's Dracula.
Yeah.
And then he goes in the castle, and it starts off normal. And we were talking about this off air, so I'm going to touch on it just a bit before we go into it deeper. Is if you didn't know, we all know Dracula.
Yeah.
Everybody knows the story of Dracula, and we know vampires. If you're reading this when this first came out and you didn't know any of these things, this would all be pretty good twist and very shocking. So he goes to the castle and very quickly realizes, well, not quickly, I think over a couple weeks he starts to realize that he's a prisoner.
Yeah.
Like, Dracula's never there during the day, but the doors are locked, and Jonathan Harker's like, wait a minute, why can't I can't leave? I'm stuck. So that plays for the first 5 chapters, and then eventually, as it builds up of him just like, now he's got to escape.
Yeah.
Knows something fucked up's happening. And then he meets some lady vampires who try. I think before that, he actually witnesses Dracula leaving at night through his window.
Yeah,
very cool scene. Climbing down the side of the castle like a lizard, which was a very cool scene.
And I know you mentioned this before. Whenever you started a little bit before me, one of the first things you noticed is Dracula is very not well kempt. Like, you know what I mean? He's not the...
Also has a big mustache throughout this.
Yeah. He's not the ladies' man that he later gets painted as.
But you do find out that whatever Dracula is doing on his nightly excursions, feeding, he is getting younger.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe I'm only like 10 or 15 chapters in, so I'm sure ladies' man Dracula, seducer Dracula will make an appearance, which is also alluded to within the next 5 chapters after this one. But before we get to that, there's a lot of cool scenes in the I really like, because the first 5 chapters are just Jonathan Harker's journal, and this whole book so far is just written in journal entries and diary entries and stuff. So we were talking about that's a little strange, but that actually brought up an interesting topic of, well, if you look back in old literature, they always had an established narrator for the most part. Like we were talking about H.P. Lovecraft. His is usually somebody's writings or first person. Like almost all H.P. Lovecraft, if not all, is first person. Somebody's writing or telling their story. Mark Twain, at least in Huckleberry Finn, he was the one telling you the story, like a modern orator, which he often did. He was considered the first stand-up comedian because he would hold shows where he would tell people stories. And it makes sense because all stories were told at one time. They weren't written down. They were just passed down. And then that you could see that in even around the writing of this time period, there's a shift and people were more focused on, well, who's telling the story? for instance, Frankenstein, I believe, like you got the monster and you got Victor Frankenstein, but it's always established who's telling the story. And then if you go on to like the vampire tropes themselves, Bram Stoker really did kind of invent the modern vampire.
Yeah.
There was a story, which I did not know this. I knew the story, but I did not know this little bit about it. It was called The Vampire, spelled with a Y. Was written in 1819 by John William Polidori. But this is what I didn't know. He was a member of that contest that had Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, and Percy Shelley when she wrote Frankenstein, or at the time, the modern Prometheus. So the first vampire story, like the first established one, actually came about from that contest they had, which is kind of cool. And I didn't read that story, but I looked into it a little bit. And there was, not like the blood sucking, but I think the character at the end dies because all her blood's drained. And like I said, without reading it, I don't know how much with like, the seductor and all that stuff, or the seducer, like how much of that would play. But I don't think that was in the original Vampire. I think most of this stuff with the bats, garlic, all that stuff is kind of Bram Stoker's creation. And then obviously vampires folklore that, that's where they really originated, and probably like fairy tales and things like that. But as far as everything we know about vampires, you can really attribute to Bram Stoker.
Pretty much, he's the
Godfather.
I was gonna say the George Romero of vampires.
Yeah, I mean, George Romero. I mean, zombies existed, but they didn't have the established rules. Dracula doesn't go out in the daytime. Well, was that established before as a vampire trope? I think Bram Stoker pretty much established that. Until they started getting sparkly. Somebody tried to change it recently, like the last 20 years.
Dicks.
Made it so much better. I want my vampires to sparkle. Sparkle because they drink so much surge. Their blood sparkles. As far as the writing, I got a hammy cramp. Oh no. Oh god, it was hamstring day. Oh, that's bad. Spencer, talk about your day. Tell them how it was good. Okay, I'm good.
It was shitty.
Oh no. Oh, I cramped it.
It was really shitty.
I can't get through the poles in the way. That's the worst. You're gonna be drinking a beer.
I hate the I haven't had them for a while, knock on wood, but there was a time where I would constantly get like calf cramps.
Ooh.
And like, cause you can't do anything to like.
You're just paralyzed.
I was really, like, I'd have to lean down and try to just like work my foot just because like I couldn't move my foot to unlock my calf like physically, like by myself. I had to like physically move it.
It's fucking terrible. As far as the writing on this story, it's obviously still kind of old-timey, but for being written in, 1897, it does, like, compared to, like, Frankenstein or a lot of other works, of even H.P. Lovecraft, which is 20 years later, I feel like the writing's not that old school.
No, it's easier, and I don't know if maybe if that has to, at least with at least the characters that I've interacted so far throughout reading it, is that the characters seem more down to earth and kind of like everyday people. Like, like we were talking about, like with H.P. Lovecraft, like all his people always had like these weird, like either something already wrong with them, or the craziness would happen, and
or they're just like super smart professors.
Yeah, or something, yeah, you know what I mean. So like
nobody's relatable. They're not like people.
Oh yeah, like you know what I mean. I really haven't heard like any like big unnecessarily words or phrasing thrown around just for like shits or giggles in this that I can really recall.
Other than a few small parts that again, because it's written in journal entry that I've read, where nothing wrong with the writing. It's just when you read it, it's like nobody would fucking write that in their own journal.
That's not
like, because he's still it's still fiction. So, for instance, Jonathan Harker. His played well because like he describes Dracula with his, he has the pointed teeth, the fangs, but then he has like putrid breath or something, and he's like stinky, and he describes Dracula. But especially when you get onto the female characters later, there were some parts where they would be describing something, and I'm like, you wouldn't, unless you're a writer, you're not describing anything like that.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, like, I never really had a journal that I wrote in, but I would not think that's how I would write those kind, in my personal journal that nobody else is gonna see.
Yeah, you wouldn't be describing, like, you'd be like, oh, the moon was out. It was full moon, big moon, or something. You wouldn't be, oh, the moon hung in the air like a princess on the balcony of, like, what? No, like, people aren't talking like that. And so every character does have those in there.
Or, like, whenever Jonathan's, fiance, like, whenever she'd be talking about her friend, like, and then to get deep into, like, her friends, it's like, you wouldn't write that in your journal about, like...
Yeah. Yeah, it just, there was, then again, at the time, like, if you read old Civil War letters, again, there's the describing things that's throwing it up, the descriptions, not so much the way they write, because that's on point, but the descriptions, like, people say don't describe things like that when it's just, nobody's going to read this.
Yeah.
It's just mine. Like, why would you do that? Like I said, I think the first... Let me go get Dracula real quick. I don't want to, shortchange this here. I switched to the Kindle version.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was just easier, because this book is fucking huge.
Well, then, too, you don't want to mess it up, and...
Yeah, I read, 10 chapters out of this, but also I read it, and I gotta use my book light, and that thing's cumbersome sometimes. Like, fucking do that. I get yelled at if I have my reading light on. Fucking, yeah, Caleb, come to bed. Oh, but you can't read in the bed. Can't read in the bed because it's got a light, and the light is as bright as the sun, and it burns my corneas out of my head. Oh, okay.
I'm going to assume all this will get cut.
You don't listen to the episodes. Especially a BookCast episode. Yeah, so what? Oh. Double index, because it's collection. It's got Dracula and other stuff.
Hey, you're the fancy guy.
Yeah, it's a good collection.
What else you got in there?
Folks, if you get the Barnes & Noble Dracula edition, you get an introduction. You get Dracula, the full novel. You get The Jewel of Seven Stars, which is his second novel. And you get The Lair of the White Worm, which is his third novel. And one of those novels is pretty much Dracula, but different, slightly.
I was gonna at some point in time through this ask you, like, if, because that's all, like, at least I know that's all that he's ever been known for is just, Dracula.
Yeah.
How if he, if he did much after that.
Dracula
was the first one, right?
I believe so. And Dracula was his, like, one-hit wonder thing where for, I think, a long time he resented his fame for Dracula and wanted to do other things but couldn't. He also has Dracula's Guest and Other Stories, which feature Dracula's Guest, The Judge's House, The Squaw, The Secret of Growing Gold, A Gypsy Prophecy, The Coming of Abel Behenna, The Burial of the Rats, A Dream of Red Hands, Crooked Sands, The Crystal Cup, The Chain of Destiny, and The Duel List, or The Death Doom of the Double Born. I like The Death Doom. That's a better name. As far as Dracula, let's check out this index. So the first 5 chapters are all Jonathan Harker's journal. And then after that, we go into letters from Lucy and Mina Murray's journal. We'll cut on all that stuff on another episode. So the first 5 journals is just, which it was a great way to start because you get introduced to Dracula in the castle immediately, and Transylvania, which I did some research, and we're going to be disappointed that 70% of this book takes place in England. At least 80% of the book takes place in England. Not cool ass Transylvania. Little disappointing. But the first 5 chapters are all Dracula's castle, so it sucks you in immediately. And a lot happens while he's just trapped in the castle. Like, you learn how creepy Dracula is. You get to meet, like I said, those 3 vampire ladies that want to suck his blood in a forbidden part of the castle.
Well, what I really liked was the slow burn and reveal that you get to see through, like, Jonathan's writing of, like, oh, and Dracula's, like, he might be, like, a little odd or whatever, but he's paying the bills or whatever.
Because he's there for months, and for the first while, at least the first month, he just thinks it's a business thing.
Yeah.
But he notices every night there's this beautiful meal put out for him, and breakfast, too, in the morning. But, and he'll join, like, Dracula will join him, but never eats or drinks anything. He's like, oh, I already ate. And then slowly, Jonathan's like, I never noticed any, because his clothes are always made and everything. He's like, I never noticed any servants.
Yeah, like anybody.
Nobody around. And then he catches Dracula in the act one night.
Yeah.
Making the dinner. He's like, wait, he put the dinner out.
Or just even like when we mentioned when he runs into the other 3 lady vampires, and you get to see like Dracula be like full blown like Dracula,
mean Dracula.
Because doesn't he grab like one of them by like the neck or something and yells at him and tosses him?
Because his strength is alluded to.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I shook his hand. It was like an iron vice. But it's never explicitly said, oh, he's a super strong human creature thing. Like, you don't know that yet. And again, if you never read Dracula, you didn't know anything about vampires, this would all be like, this guy's really weird. This is cool. And then especially the lizard scene. Yeah.
And then what I also thought was so completely fucked up about after that Dracula just goes back to like nothing ever happened.
Acts like nothing happened.
And just so it's just like this mind fuck that Jonathan has to be like, because he can't.
He has to play along.
Yeah, because like and then whenever he because Dracula's like, oh well, your time here's almost done. Write 3 letters. And to like your boss, to your girlfriend, and what the other one was, and he's like, okay, what's the date on him? And then he told him the date, and he's
future.
like, oh, I know the day that I'm probably gonna die, and I was just like, that's so fucking metal.
And also, throughout the thing, he realizes Dracula is reading his incoming mail.
Yeah.
Like, whatever letters come to him, he's reading them.
And he's not getting anything. And he won't send out certain letters.
Yeah, he reads everything. And also, the trope of vampires not being seen in mirrors comes into play. And again, I think this might be a Bram Stoker creation, because there's no mirrors in the place at all. And now think about what a cool idea that is if you are writing a creature, like you're inventing a character, and you're like, it'd be cool if you can't see him in mirrors, and then he fleshed that out. So Jonathan Harker goes into this castle. When he first gets there, he notices like the furniture in most of the rooms is kind of like moldy and gross, but then like his room's real nice.
Yeah.
Everything's brand new, and maybe like the initial hangout room or whatever. But everything else is like dark, dank castle not taken care of. But then he notices there's no mirrors anywhere too, and there's a lot of locked doors. And then one day he has a little glass thing he's using for shaving, like a little mirror, and he's shaving, and
he just comes up behind him, like up over his shoulder to like say something to him.
No, it's even cooler. When he's shaving, he nicks his neck. He cuts his neck, and blood comes out. And I think Dracula just came in and was talking to him, but he noticed like why, and that's why he nicks his neck, because he's like, why? What the fuck? I can't see this dude in the mirror, but he's right behind me. What is happening? He's looking in the mirror, no guy, but the guy's behind him talking. He's like, what the fuck? And that made him cut his neck. As soon as he cut his neck, Dracula's like, whoa, just like he goes for his neck, and it was like a really tense scene. You're like, oh shit, son. And again, if you don't know anything about Dracula sucking blood, you because when this came out, I'm assuming nobody knew that he was a vampire. You're like, what the fuck? As soon as he bleeds, he's going blood crazy? What's happening? Why does he want his blood? And then the chapter 5, because we talk about the ladies, because it's when Dracula's gone, he's like, I gotta get the fuck out of this castle. Yeah. So he ends up busting open like a door that's like not completely locked into the part of the castle he's not allowed to go in, and it's like everything is just hundreds and hundreds of years old, dirty and moldy. And then these seductress what do they call them? Vampiras?
Vampiras?
Whatever. They come out.
Vampirellas?
Yeah, vampirellas. And they are trying to seduce them, and they want to eat them, and it's very erogenous and sexy, but very disturbing. And then I think Jonathan Harker ends up like falling asleep or something. I forget what happens. But Dracula comes and, like you said, violently persuades these ladies to stop what they're doing. And then Jonathan Harker wakes up back at his room, and then when he goes down there again, that is completely locked off. Another fucked up part is there are guests from time to time, like workers that come. Because I figure it's like Romanians or like traveling gypsies or something Dracula hired to build something for him. So they start showing up, and Jonathan Harker just wants to be like, get the fuck out of here! And he tries to slip them notes and stuff, and like they don't even speak his language. Well, things come to a head one night when because Jonathan Harker gets braver, so he starts like, well, if Dracula can climb down the wall like a lizard, I can at least climb to his room. So he explores his room one day. He climbs across the way and goes into his, I think it's during the daytime, and he notices like Dracula's bedroom. There's like nothing in there. There's a big pile of gold that's like 800 years old, and some really shitty, broken, dusty furniture that nobody sleeps in, and that's it. And then there's like a passageway or something, and he goes down into it, and it's really dark. And I don't think he explores it too much, but he comes back later, and from what I understood, like the imagery was a little strange here. Was it like a underground mausoleum in a cemetery or something? There was like graves.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think there was like some kind of graves or something, but he ends up finding Dracula's coffin, and Dracula's in it, and he has blood around his mouth. Because there was also a lady who showed up wailing about her baby.
Yeah.
Her baby was missing, obviously. Dracula took the baby and ate it. And then I think she got tore apart by wolves, right? Because Dracula can control... That's another thing I didn't... Now, this one I didn't know. I didn't know Dracula or vampires can control wolves. Like, they can make them fucking, heal and then eat people. So that poor lady got eaten, I believe. But then when he sees Dracula, whose face is more flush, his hair's grown darker, he's like, what the fuck? And he sleeps with his eyes open. And I think he hits him in the face with a rock or something, like a big gash, and then he runs. And isn't that how that chapter kind of ends? Is he's still trapped there?
I think so, yeah. Because
then it goes into the letters of his fiancée Lucy. Not Lucy, Lucy's her friend. What's his fiance's name?
You just said it was, something with an M.
Mina. So we'll talk about that in the next part, because that breaks off into the other stories. Yeah. But there is some boring lady talk for a chapter 2, and I thought I was going to lose it.
Yeah.
I thought, oh no, this is where Dracula sucks ass, and I'm not going to like it. But they divert that, and it actually does wrap around back into more Dracula talk.
Yeah.
So Bram Stoker, right now where I'm at, he's actually expanding the Dracula mythos, where we get the bat vampire, and there's a cool part where he is fucking with sailors.
Okay.
Did you get to that part yet?
Yeah, because I didn't say that part. I was gonna maybe need to thread the storyline a little bit, because like up until like the boat part, which we'll talk about next episode, I was getting a little like, what is the story here? Like, but I think it was just to set up those characters,
Yeah. So we'll leave it off at that. I want to keep these episodes a little shorter than the other book, because the Conan ones are like hour long. Mainly because I am not having a lot of time editing, because I got so many submissions I have to go through now. People have been submitting like crazy for our Halloween stuff. So folks, check out that stuff. We have a lot of stories coming out.
I guess that's what happened when you have an open submission call.
Well, yeah, we do that every year though. We get like a good bit, but this year I think is because of Corona time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of publishers aren't putting out work or not accepting work. I don't know what it is, but a lot of people got a lot of writing done.
We're gonna have to start accepting like Halloween submissions in like August.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do something. So if you folks want to check that out, you go to drunkenpenwriting.com. You can follow us on Twitter at drunkpenwriting, Instagram and Facebook, drunkenpenwriting. If you want to go on Apple Podcast or iTunes or whatever the fuck it is now, give us a positive review. That would be awesome, and we'll shout you out on the show. And you can also do that if you have some other app like Podbean or Castbox or whatever apps, if they let you review.
Yeah, that always helps.
Yeah, maybe we get us more listeners and get us more fancy books sent our way. Just wanted folks to know, we got from one of our writers from previous years, I think he submitted a couple times to us, we published his work, Scott Allen Young. He has a book out, it's a short story collection, Discontents and Zealots, a collection of horrors, and he actually did us a solid by shouting us out on this, so if you folks see that online, go pick it up. Thanks again, and see you later. And drink Surge. Drink lots of Surge. Drink the Surge. Bloody Surge.